see, but I really please transmit Piali and all the colleagues of Terry the appreciation of the EU. It's essential that an office like Terry is behind the cooperation and with very concrete objectives. I want to thank the colleagues of Terry, Dr. Rashni, Dr. Amit, yes, standing, Dr. Dipankar, also all the Terry team with Miss Ria. I don't know where she is. Miss
Sorry,
Ria.
Pirik, when people stop talking, please.
Yes.
If you would mind to stop talking.
Yeah, we have to continue. So I was thanking all the colleagues here. I have a good memory, so I remember who is who more or less. So yes, Ria, she helped for the moderation. Miss Arpita Pandey, Miss Tri, I call her. I call her Tri. Yeah, Tri. It's easier for me. Miss Rashmi Muradi, and also for the people at the registration, they did a great job. Mr. Snapam and Miss Puja. In the communication, we also had Mr. Shreya Teshi. And for the IT, the people whom I met on the day one, they enabled to have a YouTube, Mr. Veer Bahadur Singh, Mr. Raul Kumar, Mr. Sanu Thakur. So you see, I'm making an effort and to pronounce, and I want also to understand the Indian name, because my wife is Japanese, and when you understand name, you understand the character of the person. So I will keep your list, and I will try to go on internet and check what's the meaning. So thank you very much. In terms of content, now we will listen to all of you guys. I this morning, because we have a G20, we are very busy at the EU embassy, but and tomorrow we have the vice president coming and the president coming in 10 days for the G20. But this morning I was speaking with my colleague on the research efficiency initiative, where Terry was working with the GIZ, one of the large EU research organization, and with the CII. So it was very interesting to see. This was a report on photovoltaic 6 years ago in 2018. It's very interesting. I like history because you can say, okay, what you wanted to do in 2018 and what have you done. So I hope that we take mark that in this group today we have a road show. For example, the Ambassador Chargé yesterday mentioned we can join on project, but the fact to have a document is not only to stay in the cupboard, is maybe 5 years later, the successor of Patrick, the successor of Pierre will take your report and will say, oh, what have you achieved 5 years later? So I really, because if you check what has been achieved, what has not been achieved, there must be a reason. And it's very, not only from a philosophical point of view, but to understand what are the barriers, and maybe some barriers were not recognized at that time on photovoltaic deployment. So we need to go back. So maybe in developing the roadshow together, we should take maybe some 10 years ago report of where they wanted to be. So it's not an historical search only, is to see already 10 years ago they had this and still has not been realized. Why? So this was what I was saying yesterday when I discussed with my daughter, who helped me with the ChatGPT. They say ChatGPT cannot make questions, can only give summaries. So let's please start the roadshow and our activities with 5 questions from 10 years ago. What is still not solved on biofuel? And then be ambitious. Okay, what should we solve now? Because now we are largely, EU and India are getting a little bit more close. Even though I think we are very far from a balanced partnership. Not enough Europeans come to India. That's a problem that I push back to the European. And you in India, you are not sufficiently putting your visibility so that we know what you are doing. So this, everybody has its own responsibility in the room here, but it's very clear that it couldn't be done more if Europeans are more interested in India, and if India display more what you are doing as excellence. So thank you. It was just to frame the discussion. I will listen. I told you that we have colleagues here, Stefan and others. We are behind a mechanism for financing joint research, for financing studies, for financing visits. So the funding is not an issue. The where to go is the issue. Thank you.
So thank you all. Patrick, want to have some words at this moment? Okay. So anyway, in few moments you have to. So now we can start our afternoon plenary. This is the final, last but final session. So in this session, we are asking the rapporteur from each of the 4 sessions we had today to present the result of today's discussion, especially the key highlights. First, I call Dr. Patrick Rehan to share this session 1 points.
So thank you, Piali. So in session 1, we were looking at the issue of bio feedstock collection and focusing on the big problem of finance. And as usually happens, when you dig into the question, you find out, well, the question is more complicated than we thought of. And in our discussions, we found that, okay, the collection of biofuel is important. We had a good discussion on the kind of costs arising there and of the challenge of organizing it locally. But we discovered also that in addition to the need to finance collection, there's also energy needs locally, the solarization, etc., making sure that the energy used locally is renewable. These are other projects that also need finance. So if we're going to talk about finance for feedstock collection, we need to include in the envelope or the inventory of projects to be financed solarization. We had an interesting discussion as well on the role of densification. And I have to say, I learned a lot in this because I had heard of densification before and had my own image of why it's important. But in the discussion, we had a much better understanding of why it's important as an enabler of distribution and as a way of lowering the cost of distribution of feedstocks as well. One of the things we discussed, because we had some bioeconomy entrepreneurs, and we were discussing the fact that often when you give financial support for a project, it's an opportunity to encourage other behaviors which are good, perhaps the adoption of good practices which are good for the farming community. So there may be, we do this in Europe, we have things called green mortgages where if somebody wants to extend a house, we say, why don't you do PVs and insulation and everything? Because it will increase the value of the house. So it's an opportunity working with local agricultural experts and extension officers to see, okay, if we're going to finance this, maybe we should include in the package finance for other things which are good for that agricultural community. We looked a lot at the role of policies, and how policies shape the environment for investment. We had a great discussion on that. And one of the things that jumps out, and I have to thank Colonel, Ahuja for his wonderful insights on that, is that the government is very, very open to new ideas and change. And if you can come with the right idea at the right time, etc., things can happen very quickly. So this is an extremely optimistic thing for us to understand, that if you have good ideas, etc., and if you're in the right network in India, things really can happen quickly afterwards. But in talking about the role of local government, one of the things is getting the different silos of local administration to sit together: agriculture, energy, industrial policy, human resources. This is still a challenge, and it will be a challenge, and it will be relevant for raising the finance for feedstock collection as well. So on that, we noticed that there are many networks in Europe where we look at exactly the same problems. We're still at the problem stage, we're learning about things, we're doing pilots, And the managers that are, local managers that are trying to move things forward, we're really scrabbling for good ideas. And I think we have as much to learn from India in Europe as the other way around. So putting those networks in contact, I think could be a very interesting next step. And it's something that can be done with, relatively modest funding and maybe the small contracts that we spoke about this morning, breaking down those silos. And one of the insights that came is that there are some really very big projects, that come from central government in India, and we have to align ourselves. If Europe can add some value in India, we need to align ourselves with what's going on and choose the right place where we could make a difference. But that requires, a little bit of study and a little bit of consideration, and it's the kind of insight that we need to achieve in the next step in the development of our collaboration. So with that, we have an idea roughly of what we need to do in the next step of collaboration that we could do based on a small contract and the ultimate idea, I think, is to develop a platform for collaboration on financial innovation. There's a lot. We spoke about crowdfunding, we spoke about energy communities, impact funding, we spoke about ESCOs, bundling, securitization. There's so many subjects there which are really new in the world of finance, and they just don't get the attention they deserve. And we also know that there are just as many interesting and new things happening in India as there are in Europe. So our ultimate goal is to start with baby steps, these small contracts that Hirik might be able to fund. And in the next step, we set up a platform where we have ongoing collaboration, easy collaboration between groups in India and groups in Europe. And we look how to mainstream these new financial instruments, which will be essential for achieving these big goals and the massive change that's needed. So anyway, I leave it as that. I'm happy that we have actionable results out of this. I didn't have time to make some slides, but I think the other sessions have done much better than me on that, and they'll report to you now. So thanks to everybody for their inputs.
So I now request Ms. Arpita Pandey to present the key highlights from session 2.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So I was in the session 2 reporting on carbon footprint, biodiversity, land use change, and ESG. So the problems related to the reporting, carbon reporting, or the data in general has been highlighted in the during the session, and we got a very detailed, I will say, background note from the Patrick. So very thankful for that. It definitely helped us to keep our discussion aligned, like what are the challenges and how we need to address those things. So I'll not take much time. I had tried my best to compile all the discussion outcomes in the form as you suggested in the morning, in the form of like, okay, what could be the joint, what are the other options apart from the default mechanism which you suggested in the morning. So I tried to compile all of the discussion outcomes in that format itself. So the major, I'll say the major input which we got is to that for the reporting, we need to build a universal digital platform. It could be done in the form of the joint undertaking. We can take the learnings from the EUs, how they have done it, and how the standardization of biofuels has been done under it. And the digital platform could be a very, it could be a platform mainly for the producers, for the suppliers or the sourcing points also, for the users, for the government, for certification agencies, and all the information could be available. So there will be, it will be a very transparent system for anyone who wants to see, okay, what is the carbon footprints of any particular biofuel and how it is impacting the environment, or what are the other socio-economic implications which are happening. So that could be done. Next was the mechanism for the validation of data reporting. It could be done in the form of the FPA. Next is the CDP, Carbon Disposal Project. They could, since currently they have their questionnaire in which they include about the energy consumption, water, and climate, and they are also working towards the biodiversity. So we got one suggestion, like they can revise their questionnaire in which they can include the biofuel also as a category, which will help to promote the transparency and comprehensive reporting. And it could be done in the form of the small contract. They are happy to do it. And the next next input which we got from our discussion is there is a need for the innovative financial solutions, and the major help which it will get us is the incentivization for the small producers to go towards the sustainable biofuels. Next is related to the certification of biofuels. Again, it needs to be in the form of the joint undertaking along with EU, because if any biofuel is being produced here or being used in the shipping or in the aviation industry, and if it's going to the another country or in the EU or America, they have their own kind of certification. They are using their different compliance norms, and it needs to be balanced across the globe. So again, it's a form of the joint undertaking which needs to be done. NCCF is open to collaborate for the standardization process. GMC is open to facilitate industrial support for the digital platform. Terry will be happy to work in the capacity building program, as we currently also have with the EU, and we are working in the collaboration with the EU. And one more major, even in your background note also, we had this, what is the sustainable fuel? So in that outline, we got into a final conclusionary point that it is required that we need to broaden the definition of the sustainable fuel, and we need to include the non-biological origin feedstock also along with it, and which will definitely help in the marine transportation. And as for the collaboration works going on, Mr. A.M. Singh and Mr. Madhavendra, they want to, if given the opportunity, they do want to discuss the how they want to collaborate in future. So if possible, they would like to discuss it in detail. So I will leave that point for them. Okay, thanks a lot.
I think we'll wait until the end for kind of comments, et cetera, and questions.
So thank you, Arpita. So I now call upon Ms. Trinayana Kaushik for session 3, summing up the key points.
Connecting from drive. Let's go discuss.
Problems.
Okay.
We need to take this.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will be presenting the outcomes of breakout session 3, which was circular bioeconomy around biofuels. So actually yesterday, Elena and I had a brief discussion on what are the topics that we are going to put forward to the participants. And these were the 4 topics that we had kind of had a discussion in the pre-meeting. So mostly the discussions were around product and application, what biomass should be chosen for what kind of applications. Then we talked a little bit on the business model, and then about the biomass and biofuel production supply chain, and then how to develop partnerships and collaborations. So the discussion highlights in the first meeting was that the first we talked about what were the priority areas based on which biofuel should be given focus in India. So different participants had given different ideas, that environmental, economic, social benefits, etc. And after the discussion, we came to a conclusion that in India, both environment and social consideration should be prioritized, considering that we have as a country socioeconomic aspirations to be taken care of along with the environmental side. Some of the recommendations that came were like awareness generation and task force building, which we have developed into short-term and mid-term action points. So first was creation of a small team to scout for and contact existing committees at government level. And these team that we are talking of is teams from India, from different levels of stakeholders, and then also people from EU, people who has already an expertise, who could give us best practices or models to replicate. Secondly, another point that was come up, because collection was constantly coming up as a roadblock for that is collection of biomass. So there was this point raised that that the municipalities which have a lot of solid waste in place but do not have enough resources to do anything about it. So that was one of the target areas that we thought should be, because they already have collected waste. So if resources can be given to them, that there and awareness can be generated among them, a lot can be done from the waste at municipalities. In midterm solutions, again, CSA, which is a coordination support action plans, which Patrick was talking about, can be developed through this committee. So this was one of the, what is those committees going to do in the midterm once they are, formed, or we start the process of forming them in the short term. So that was one of the actions that is anticipated. And in the midterm or long term, again, support to municipal corporations. The instrument is in a way to be decided what we want to do, but like we can again talk and have a further discussion on what kind of instrument can be given, what kind of funding can be taken up. Next is the business model. The recommendation was again that we expect other countries which have successful business models to share with us what is their capex, opex, or ROI model that can be replicated with a little bit of tweaking in the Indian context. Cutting down on logistics costs. So there was examples from Europe that how forestry resources is moved in river waters, and in Indian context, how we can replicate it around, at least in the places where rivers are there, and bamboo, even in NRL, one of the participants had said that bamboo is actually transported across rivers to cut down logistic costs. So those kind of innovative ideas are important and should be made part of any kind of upcoming business. Very important point was that monetization of other co-products that come up in the biofuel production process. So, and from a very nascent stage itself, so that so that startup biofuel refineries or productions do not die down. Short-term action plan from these recommendations that came up was that a roadshow of biorefinery companies, participations from both EU and India to present, share best practices, funding models, operational models with Indian colleagues, because there are not too many probably models present in India currently, but there's a lot to learn, lot to exchange knowledge. And then again, a CSA kind of a collaboration, including all value chain and internal external experts. The third was supply chain. There were some bottlenecks, low market value of feedstock currently, or low, and in some places there are no markets at all. Some of the recommendations that came up were that local level aggregation of biomass, which is absent in regional or remote areas of India today. So something like regional level bale makers or biomass depositories or pre-treatment centers in villages, so that people who are farmers who are producing agri residue need not go to far off distances, which becomes which adds to their cost. One example that was coming, which kind of highlighted that it is so important for producers itself to have control of the feedstock, is that CBG. A lot of CBG is gaining popularity because people who have land have a tendency to produce the napier grass and then give out and then produce it. So they have control of the feedstock. So accordingly, that biofuel gets emphasis. And then integrated production is when the co-products are monetized, then in a way we can cross-subsidize the final product, even if it's expensive. Short-term actions and mid-term actions from these recommendations were that, again, a roadshow of Indian and EU experts to for feedstock production and logistics to share best practices with farmer association. The goal is to, overcome those bottlenecks in terms of policy. So what example is this, that we were thinking that why can't existing infrastructure like APMCs or agricultural extension services that are present in India can itself be used to sell off not just fruits and vegetables, but also the biomass or the rice straw that farmers have. So we need to check in the short term that if there is any policy barrier that is hindering, and if there is, then we need to overcome them in the short term. And in the long term, something like a framework partnership alliance, again with people from mainly targeting a bottom up approach, so that everybody, farmers, industries, businesses, experts, technicians, and academicians, everyone gets a chance to say and what they actually need. The third was partnerships and collaborations. So the recommendations were, some of the recommendations were in a way existing. So the current method of DST and DST, DBT and EU partnerships were that they have virtual brokerage and marketing, matchmaking events where they have different types of calls. So these were some of the discussion points that came out. And the short-term and mid-term actions that came out of these discussions was that appoint a multidisciplinary task force to map the actors in each category. So again, like bottom-up approach, mainly accumulating everyone. And same task force leverage connections to get the actors on board for a networking event. So this is basically like we have newsletters, right, which we send. Now in our mails we get so many newsletters that we probably not open that always, but if we have some people relevant chosen, and then we periodically bring them into a group to exchange learnings and take their learnings or their work, so that kind of a thing can be done for a particular theme or sub-theme within a sector. So, and midterm is again like a CSA kind of an arrangement to create and develop a network. So that's it, I think.
So thank you, Trinana. For session 4 summing up, I call Ms. Margarita and Dr. Amit Thakur to come present.
Yes. So thank you very much to each one of you, to European Union, and for organizing this wonderful event. Our topic, in fact, largely was around social transformation. That's one of the key topics where the large range of masses in India has to be addressed. So we thought about what could be the larger sectors which can be covered into this. So we took 4 major area where almost more than 50 million population is directly impacted. So one area, in fact, was the agriculture sector, the farmers producing organization. Second, we took this energy transition where the LPG segment and the biomass has been captured. Third part, we took the gender aspect where large scale, participation of women along with the NGOs were discussed. And fourth part majorly was the education policy, the national education policy was captured. So if you take cumulatively, the segments are different, but we are very fortunate to have speakers nationally, globally, from Europe, from Bangladesh, from various government ministries today. Based on that, I'll take up the first slide in detail. So the key takeaways that we are highlighting is first, which comes up is supporting agribusiness businesses around biofuels. So it comprises of two things majorly: skilling of farmers, and second part is utilization the farmers producing organization. If you see at present, the Ministry of Agriculture has come up with establishment of 10,000 FPOs, which is farmers producing organization, and there it is 10,000 means 10,000 blocks of India, and one FPO means minimum 750 people. So total it goes out to be 1 crore, which is 10 million. So the amount of capacity building, training, enhancement, and the farmers don't know, in fact, how to, be part of the whole scheme. And therefore, the government has taken this initiative, and we have huge opportunity in terms of getting into this biofuel segment and doing the training capacity building of the that segment of the community, which is in a way comprises of more than 55% in India, and which contributes around 12 to 14% to Indian economy. So that's the first takeaway from our side. Second is the capitalizing on the existing training infrastructure in India. A lot of infrastructures are already available in India. Whether you talk about in the power sector, energy sector, agriculture sector, we need to aggregate all those sectors. And how we are going to do that? The government training institutes, national and state level, and we can also go to the local level. So those are all established. The speakers who were part of our panel discussion, they suggested that there exists more than multiple set of entities. We would like to engage them, and that would create a hub and spoke model, and which will create the real skill set in the biofuel sector. Third area that we want to intervene the higher education institutions, universities, research centers. In the discussion in the NEP segment, National Education Policy, we have 2020 in place, which has been established by central government, Union Government of India, and it spreads across the school education along with the university education. You see the range of this whole segment, and climate change is a key factor. If the students know about it, if the students are aware about this, then you can see the impact of change which is available. So we want to capture NEP and from the very starting level, where when you put the seed at that point of time, if you address to the solution, then it makes a huge impact. And it's a huge space, and the training capacity building would lead to new set of ideas and new capacity building. Third part that we want to take away, skilling across the biofuel value chain. It's in fact identifying skilling needs at every level. Example, farmers, aggregators, processing, production, distribution, and marketing. So this whole value chain skilling is crucial, and we do it in a structured manner by through the policy intervention, also on ground, whatever is available. Next comes the inclusivity in training and capacity building. We discussed the gender and social inclusion, where women have a key role, and women are not able to come to the mainstream in Indian context for multiple reasons. They have huge responsibility in a lot of things. They have to complete the job, but again, this skilling can bring huge change. So that's what we have proposed here, and that's how we want to go ahead. Now, in terms of the next one, the skilling across the public authorities. This is the main thing where we want to highlight that the public administrators, even the leaders, the politicians, what came up in fact in the today's discussion from one of the bureaucrats who was there, that in India, in fact, people, the threshold, the starting age is 25 years for the politicians to be part of the parliament or for the assembly. So they need to be properly, trained on various issues of climate change or skilling, which will, because they are the decision makers in the whole process. So they need to be engaged in a manner in which they can contribute to the well-being of the nation or maybe the global impact. They have to negotiate at various forums. So skilling is required, and we have several platforms already in place. So we discussed those platforms which are already existing, and we want to engage them because they are policymakers, decision makers, and that would have a very profound impact. Next, we go to the, so that includes national, state, and regional levels in India, and maybe globally. Next, we move to the enhancing opportunities for cooperation. Amongst different actors, ministries, departments, agencies, you always find in India or Europe, there is a gap. So who will, fulfill that gap? So it is a great opportunity for this platform to engage them and to bring this change. So we could be that catalyst who can bring that change. So cooperation between states, because state to state also we find it's a huge country. We have 36 states and union territories, and every state is unique, different, and maybe like a country. So there, this concept of training, capacity building, and skilling is needed. Next, we go to the final one from my side: international knowledge exchange and cooperation. There could be good practices, best practices, which are in India at the union level, at the state level, or at the local level. And there are good practices which are there in EU or outside India. So those best practices need to be exchanged. Knowledge sharing should be done so that there is more cohesiveness and enhancement of knowledge. So this is from my side. Then I request Margarita, who was very key part of this whole discussion, to take it forward. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. I will just add few elements here because mostly we have covered everything. But let me quickly introduce myself because yesterday I did not spoke in public. I am Margarita Nikolovska. I am Senior Human Capital Development Expert and I work in the European Union Agency. My task today with the colleagues from TERI was to go deep in this skills aspect and social transformation. TERI covered aspects of India, and I brought aspects of European Union member states into the discussions. Quickly going through this. First, what we discussed a lot in Europe when talking about skilling and reskilling is absolutely one big target group which we shall never forget. It's youth. So in our policy agenda for skilling, youth are our important element. Obviously, it is crucial to think about adults as well. Not only those between 18 years old to 25 years of age, but also to adults. There will be a lot of needs in this huge transformation change, that there will be adults who will have opportunities to take new jobs. So massive skilling, reskillings is on the agenda in biofuel energy. Very popular instruments that we are using, and you are familiar with it completely, I'm sure about it, but let me mention it, is career guidance. And why career guidance? Because going around Europe, we are also discovering that we as adults, there are more efforts needed to put us in a new reskilling schemes. What is absolutely important is learning from each other on innovative approaches, how to develop skills agenda in the sector. And here we talk about curriculum, what type developing curriculums to fit well these capacity building actions in biofuel sector. On the action points, we have been also quite modest, and we try to be realistic what we can do jointly as European Union India cooperation, and we put forward as a start first a small activity to go into greater details of the discussions that we had today. For example, we were talking about different type of indicators, how to strengthen monitoring of this type of developments, how you monitor the biofuel strategy, for example, and you know that you are reaching the objectives, and what is the role here on skills? Which are those indicators relevant for skills agenda? We discovered in the discussion that there are many input indicators, but what about process indicators, output indicators, which are largely relevant for monitoring the success of the strategies in biofuel energy? roadshow goes without saying. I mean, it was very pleasant to hear from the senior the director from the TRI actually asking me, Margarita, are you talking for India or for European Union? So I was really, really pleased. Sorry for quoting you, but that was really a very important element. So roadshow on skills, focus on skills in biofuels in the countries in European Union and vice versa, where we bring Europeans to come to Europe. It's absolutely a must, and I fully agree with Peric, and we are on board, let's say. Coordinating support actions for the future. Again, for me being in the EU processes, I know that it's very important that we don't jump into conclusions. We really need to think through what could be something that is interesting for both partners on European Union and on the India side. We have learned, I also worked with Patrick in the past a lot, for example, on foresight tools, which could be especially useful when you have opening up of a new sector for skills, where not single expert can sit down and design the curriculum, but rather you have a network of experts that needs to be engaged in this activity. Then next, okay, let me now start to close down. For me, this is the critical slide when we sit together around the table and when we discuss skills and human capital development. No human capital development can take place if we isolate from each other. For example, it is not only bringing on one table the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Skills or Ministry of Labor, which will be very common in EU member states, but we need to have on one table also Ministry of Agriculture, who already went through important social transformation learning processes with farmers, with farmer production organization. And here you find very important players. I'm not going to go through all of them, but please, let's keep in mind that, and it has been stressed in our session as well, the civil society organizations, especially in big countries like India, play crucial role in supporting government and local communities to act on the issues that are needed. They can fill important gap because not government programs for skilling can reach to all people. So that is why we need to keep in mind, let alone research centers. Research institutions are critically important because they know something that those that are policymakers sitting around the table need to know. For example, I learned today that there are 1.4 million engineers in India, and this was thanks to TERI research, who are maybe ready for reskilling or taking new roles in biofuel fuel sector. So all this knowledge needs to be around one table in order to really bring brilliant future for the skill sectors, which is crucial for social transformation. There are questions, a lot of questions, not answers, but questions. And I will end up here only with one, because we had in the PowerPoint presentation a set of questions. It is critical to understand what businesses need in this development. So understanding better the employers' needs is critical for bringing the future forward. And this can be developed only through a cooperation within the sector. This is universal truth. It's common for India. It's common for any country in which I worked. So thank you very much.
So our next have the panel discussion, but before that we have a 10 minutes tea break we can take. Shall we take? Because they have kept it ready. So, so anyone can go and take and bring the tea also if needed. Okay. Okay, okay, no problem. So, okay, okay. So I just kept it ready. So now we have a panel discussion. So we have to add some more chairs here. Total chairs.
Up to you. So maybe I just, we do it from the floor to save some time because people are tired.
Okay,
Okay?
so you can call.
Yeah. Okay.
That's fine.
So everybody is tired, you know, and it'd be great to have a coffee and wrap up the afternoon because you've been working hard all day. Also, you've listened to 4 presentations, which are very dense with lots of information. So you must be drowning, you must have headaches. As well as the coffee, we should have given you aspirin and stuff like that. So what we'll do, because I now have to make sense of this and condense it in a useful way by the end of the week to go into the roadmap. And then in the months afterwards, I'll be working with Pierrick and his colleagues in the commission to see how to formulate the next steps based on all the practical constraints that we have to work with. So to wrap up, what would be really helpful would be final remarks from people and especially ideas about priorities, because we've heard a lot of things and everything is important, as you just heard, everything is important. So let's have some ideas about the priorities and advice for the roadmap, where we need to start and what you think are the first things that need to be put in priority. So Colonel Ahuja, you can jump in.
Apologies for raising my hand. I need to leave. 2 points. Thank you. So 2 points to highlight. As part of the Clean Energy Ministerial MI8 G20 event, there is a Global Biofuel Alliance announcement which was to be done and signing was to be done. There are 3 founding countries as participants: India, USA, Brazil. There are 19 countries and institutions which have lined up to sign this document. Unfortunately, the document signing did not happen. And now it is slated for co-terminus with the Prime Ministerial Executive G20 event to happen on 9th and 10th of September. So there is something which didn't work in the document to get signed, and hence a gap. And the reason why I highlight this is the gap is a lack of individual nodal agencies in countries. So biofuel is, like one of the speakers mentioned, multi-sectoral engagement. So you have power, you have petroleum, you have rural development, you have aviation, and few more, skilling, education. And thereby, each of these have their own sectoral agendas to put forward. When you start synergizing it under one framework of biofuel, so where I come to is as a solution maybe, is to have a nodal agency for biofuels. It could be a ministry, it could be a department in a ministry, and hence that nodal agency could be responsible for synergizing amongst all the stakeholders. So that's point 1 to make. And this nodal agency also would be then the engagement agency on the global platform. Because when you're announcing the Global Biofuel Alliance, which is the agency from India and likewise other countries, which is going to participate. Because for every product, you have a different ministry which is going to look at it. So maybe under this as a short-term, engagement strategy, there could be merit for between EU and India looking at nodal agency formation for biofuels. So that was one point to make. The second was common linkage in all the 4 presentations which came about was feedstock and problems related to feedstock and skilling around there. So again, if that's the common problem statement, let's look at a roadmap to address that first and then talk about technological intervention. So we are saying we are there with technology development, intervention, projects coming, and I'll give some examples which might be hard hitting. We have 1,000 crores, close to a $150 million project standing in Panipat, 2G ethanol refinery. More than 1 year back, Honorable Prime Minister inaugurated it. It still doesn't produce ethanol. Let's set our house in order before setting up a global biofuel alliance. We have compressed biogas projects under Satat scheme, Germany investment Verbio. We have investment from the biodiesel company Manzar in Mumbai. We have Indian companies, private sector, public sector, oil marketing companies, projects on ground. Not one project produces more than 10% of output. And the single problem across each project is feedstock supply chain management. And we are still saying invest billions of dollars in supply chain management, on the project side. Please invest a couple of millions of dollars first on supply chain management and then set up the project. So we are, pardon my language, bucking up the wrong tree. Let's set supply chain management first and then the most appropriate project for that utilization to come up. So that's the way to look at it, bottom up and not top down. So that's the second suggestion to make. The third one being the innovative finance side. We have to get financing on supply chain management in place for the sustainability to happen along with the reporting. So if that's put in place, definitely capital is available globally for projects to come. So these are 3 points from my side.
So listen, thank you much for that. I mean, this is exactly the kind of advice we need, very clear, cutting, and also the number that was given. All of the projects, they're not yet at 10% capacity. So this really is an urgent issue because anything we do is incredible, until we have people operating at capacity. So thank you again for that. Chaba, I saw you had your hand up. Here, grab the mic.
Thank you very much. Whilst I was listening to all of this, and I'm sorry I'm coming out of the financial sector, this is an ideal ESG story, of which there are not enough around. If you think about it, E is ecology. If we go to an investor and say, we have got an ecological fund, well, he's going to say, who is going to buy the bloody biofuel? It's mandatory. What are you talking about? Investors think in ticking the box. He has got a list of questions. And when we say the supply is there, well, who is going to buy it? Air France, Air India, Lufthansa, Emirates. Do we need more? No, thank you very much. So that's covered. Social, what we have been hearing, including people, re-educating people, helping people to develop. Next tick in the box. Finally, governance. I'm sure that there are certain management issues as well, which need to be addressed. There are plenty, a pool of retired. And Margaret, you were talking about all the pool of people, including myself. They can sit on boards. They can bring governance to various steps. They are very happy to be involved in the growth of the market, in development. So supply chain is an issue. Maybe somebody knows something about supply chain. He can come, he can support the company into which the fund is investing. The good thing about private equity ESG funds is that they take big stakes. So in your plant, 150 million have been invested. They could be taking a third of that. They put somebody on the board. They help with the management of it. So it's an actual cooperation, not only on finance, but on managing and on running it. And it would solve a big issue for people who actually want to invest into ESG products, but there's nothing about. And India is definitely a clear story. So it covers the next thing, introducing India to Europeans and the other way around. You wanted to have a task force of people coming. Well, if you've got 10, 15 investors who are interested in coming here, a roadshow to show them where their money will go is mandatory. Suddenly, 15 high-level fund managers know where to go, know something about India, will have enjoyed something, will be talking about it. And I think these grassroots movements need to happen. I remember my former wife, whenever she came back, she was telling for a week, she was speaking about the beauty of India and what she has been eating and how wonderful Kerala is. So we need this to happen. And if somebody can sit down at a dinner and talk about something, that's where things are happening. So that would be my contribution to this one.
Oh, great. That's a new idea. So an investor roadshow where we bring ESG investors who are looking for products and we show them what's going on in India and say, these are the products that you can invest in. They tick the box for you and it does everybody a favor by moving things on in terms of saving the planet, etc. Okay.
One fund which we propose to them, they invest likely a Luxembourg fund center of Europe. And in order to see what the final investments are, that's when they come here, they inspect it.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, but anyway, it should be clear to everybody, I think, now that the finance is an issue that we need to deal with, and it's really one of the things on the agenda, along with supply chains, capacity development. And I see someone has their hand raised over there.
Yeah. Although a couple of points have already been discussed, and my session also, session 2 related to reporting, we have mentioned about this. But as a part of government machinery for more than 37 years as a bureaucrat, and now handling a civil society organization as Director General, what I find that definitely we talk about a lot about availability of data, authentic data. And when we talk about biofuels, then definitely first thing is about authentication, second is about validation. So whatever I find in when we are going to develop any standards and a certification scheme, which are the parameters based on those authentication or validation of data, we are going to set up our principles. And on those principles, how you are going to develop your criteria and indicators if you talk about sustainable biofuels. That is important aspect. And then some of my colleagues was definitely mentioned that first we need to fix our own setup in our own home ground. Then we will go outside and talk about Europe and other countries. So definitely it's a high time to develop our own standards in terms of our own specific needs, involving all the stakeholders, and definitely it has to be a multi-stakeholder consultation approach. There we have to have, and what we are following in our standard development process, that it takes about 2 years to develop any of the standard scheme. And definitely for sustainable biofuels, when we are thinking about, definitely we need to collaborate and coordinate with all the stakeholders. And definitely government is also one of the main setup. And second aspect, my colleagues were discussing about skilling. Definitely, if you are trying to, unless you are not going to change the perception of the society or the mindset, whether are they going to use biofuels? If you go to the transport sector or the road transport sector and asking about that, why don't you use biofuel? First, you need to find out. So what I was thinking about that, there are two aspects about that. One, to think about how to have an authentication of the data. And second, to reach to those peoples and to have a better capacity building and skilling to the masses. That is two important aspects which I would like to flag
up. Just quickly on that, my nightmare scenario is activists in Europe who have some idea that things are not being well managed, deforestation or something, and they go to the local politicians, and we have legislation that says, no, 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 we don't want biofuel from India for reasons that are not scientific and are not fair, you know. And the best thing we can do is to have data that is scientific and objective and trustable, and then we're in a very good position, you know, to defend ourselves and say, okay, things could be better, but we're making progress. And few can argue with that.
Standardization of data, the point. The data standards across EU today on biofuels are predominantly based on wood. So what's happened is all based on wood, and characteristics of sawdust are the pellets or is the biofuel development. And today, Europe, UK, Japan have decided to move away from that because it was not sustainable. You were cutting down trees. Whereas if you look at India, the Indian standards are getting developed based on farm agri residue. And there is a demand for that across the world now. However, the existing standards don't kind of see what India is able to produce, and hence India can't export. So gap or the requirement is bringing the standards on one plane and standardization across the world. If you are going to use a biofuel from India, would have a characteristics, should be acceptable for use in the European Union, and maybe vice versa. So the global trade on biofuels is wood, and we need to move away from that. So hence, better standardization and understanding of the global biofuel resources, and based on that, standards to be made. So Indian standards are getting made. BIS is working on it. There is another committee from ASCI working on it. And hopefully in the next 3 to 6 months' time, we would have standardization on densified biomass and biomass products available. So this is BIS standards. But is it applicable for the European Union? The answer there is no. So hence, the FT standardization, etc., needs to be worked concurrently amongst the two.
Elena, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. This is a very interesting remark, and what comes to mind to me, I come from the chemical sector, so what comes to mind to me is the REACH system in Europe for new chemicals registration. And we have seen that at the beginning, it seemed that for certain aspects, this is quite relatively punitive because it's very complex, very costly. But we've seen many, many countries around the world that either the manufacturers in other countries will produce REACH compliant products and register them with REACH, or other countries such as Korea, they have their own version of REACH, which is Korean REACH, which is, let's say, very similar. It has some differences, but quite small differences. So I agree with you that we need to go towards a shared system of let's say, on the compliance level. That is one topic. The other topic that I wanted to go back to, very practical actions and considerations. The EU has invested a ton of money on biorefineries, has funded a ton of projects already in the past years on all levels of technology readiness, from research and innovation actions to demo plants to flagship plants. So these guys, and some plants are now producing. We see the Sweetwood product, Granule Invest in Latvia, I think. Then there are the Finnish guys. We have Novamont in Italy that I don't know how much public money has been granted from Italy, from the EU in the past decades, I would say. We should leverage the obstacles that these guys have already managed to overcome and tell them, okay, now you share your story, you share your, because they have had obstacles in feedstock collection. They have had obstacles in regulatory processes. They have had obstacles in all sorts of things like CapEx, OpEx balance, return on investment, all these things. And I think it's important that we share that there is a lot of knowledge that can be shared. Then, of course, it needs to be, let's say, absorbed by the Indian companies and of course, adapted to the context. Is not the same country, but I think that should be something. And for example, the Bio-Based Industries Consortium. I mean, all these guys are part of the Bio-Based Industries Consortium. Bio-Based Industries Consortium is the private part of the Circular Bioeconomy Joint Undertaking. So, I mean, they for sure are willing to support these types of activities is just their role. So that is my suggestion.
Maybe, Patrick, one last point to just
okay.
make.
Yep.
The pricing side, product pricing. How do you come to product pricing? Either it could be regulatory or it could be open market based. And we have seen in the biofuel development in India in the last decade, product pricing is still not in place. So 2G ethanol, we have 5 plants constructed or getting constructed, but we don't have a 2G ethanol price in India as yet. Compressed biogas, we have seen an evolution in the last 7-8 years, pricing going northwards, but still projects not coming, scheme in place. And the same product has a price on the EU side, which is higher. So we expect production here at a lower cost, fair enough, but the market making mechanism needs to get defined. And maybe EU has done it earlier, could be replicated and kind of, developed there. So product pricing side also at least support from regulatory mechanism for a defined time period. Defined number of projects need to be put in place.
This is a great subject that we need to look into. There are several people that want to jump in as well, so please.
In India, our structure is different. We have a couple of ministries dealing with biofuel at the federal level, but it comes under the Ministry of Agriculture. It comes under the Ministry of Power, probably. It comes under the Ministry of Petrochemicals. So, but the Ministry of Agriculture is a state subject. So we are 36 states. My point is that to have a social transformation at the level which we discussed, we need to have the policy update for that support. The states have different policies. The central government has different policy. This policy of biofuel, I think, was made in 2009 or was with the aim to blend 20%. That's only in the blending side. But, the other support of finance, the other support of, capacity building, skilling, I think that those are state subject, and the state requires financing, and the EU could be a very important support, because unless the states have a policy, I think it's very difficult to, have a transformation, happen in the rural and the, community level. So I think that issue needs to be taken up. Thank you.
Just in Europe, we have a mechanism at EU level where we publish directives, and then the member states have to implement those in law in the member states. And it can easily happen, that we have inconsistencies and conflicts. But that's just Europe and India. When we go to the international level as well, there are other countries involved. There's the rest of Asia producing biomass. And these, because of the international trade in biofuels, which is starting like now, it's starting very soon. Unless we have clarity on those things, there could be chaos in international trade and great uncertainty as to the availability of fuels, for air carriers and shipping companies. But I think this is something, maybe a joint, some kind of an initiative where we have a platform and the regulators at different levels can sit and talk to each other, an observatory perhaps to know what's going on so that we have up-to-date facts on the status of policies, etc. I think we need a platform where we can talk about these things easily rather than waiting for the summit to come around and have the clash of lawyers, with their, which isn't a recipe for progress. So who else wants to jump in there? Piali.
Most of the point has been captured. Just I will add 1 or 2 more points. Touching the reporting point, Dr. Singh has already mentioned about the benchmarking and having those standards. These are very important, these biofuel standards and all. And we also discussed, I think there is mostly when we talk about this, we go to the stakeholders, which is little big stakeholders or big players. So like when we talk about the biomass, there are many small players, and where that reporting is missing because not only the awareness, also the investment is not there and there is nothing structured way. So I think for that we need to make that kind of templates of reporting, which may not be very complex, but it can be very simple kind of things, We have to explain to them why it is important, because maybe people will be very scary why all the data we are collecting from them, because that may scare them. So it has to be very transparent, and that's what even Dr. Singh mentioned that time. So it should come from there where they can share their data, because data disclosure is a very, very big issue here. So we have to develop that kind of transparent templates or models for sharing of data, going to definitely the big players, but also to the small players, because agricultural and all these residues are important. Second, from the marine perspective, because when we had the discussion, the representative from the EU was mostly from the south. So we discussed the marine part also. So it is very different kind of play for the marine, though it is called biofuel, but it's completely different, 180-degree. From that perspective, we have a recommendation that we should, especially from marine, at this moment not south, but we should also broaden the horizon of the feedstock and take some of the non-biological origin feedstock like plastics and this. In India, this will be very, very useful, especially when talk about the marine fuels or road transport fuels. So because we can't, because that is a very major part of our waste. So if it is only biological origin, maybe to SAF it may work, but it will not work. And third point is, I know things are in parallel moving, and we have to have you explained very beautifully that how the small projects and this goes. But as I presented from the marine, even from the SAF, it works. So there are like, today we don't have any of those methanol, hydrogen derivative fuels and all these things in marine, but those are already happening in Europe. So when we talk about the generation of that fuels and all, but the infrastructure, I mean, bunkering, storage, the safety protocols and all these things, I think EU is already ahead of us. So there are a lot of things we can do in collaboration. Again, here this technology may come a little later, but the training, capacity building and sharing of knowledge and development. So I think these 3 points I wanted to.
You just reminded me also about the plastic issue, because there's a need to do something useful with waste plastic and plastic pollution. But this is going to be the subject of new legislation that's in the pipeline. And there are big discussions between the European Union and United Nations institutions on new guidelines and legislation on plastic pollution. But it's really important for the biocommodities, because bioplastic sounds good, and it is good in the sense that it doesn't come out of a hole in the ground, But it could be bad in the sense that it's just as polluting as many of the fossil fuel-based plastics. So this is going to require, a whole new attention, new engineering courses, new approaches to development of plastic products. And but it's also an opportunity of what to do with the plastic waste, and make use of that. So I think it makes sense to include fuels derived from that kind of waste as well. And there may be others as well, non-biological, that I don't know about. Anybody else wants to jump in? You're giving us a lot of homework. I only have until Friday to complete this roadmap. But was there anybody online with their hand raised that wanted to jump in? Yeah. Because if there's nobody else, we'll wrap it up. I'll give the mic. It's okay. So nobody has raised their hands. Is there anybody joining us online who'd like to jump in and make a comment? This is your last chance now. Yeah, you will need to unmute. If you can raise your hand virtually, we'll unmute you so that you can comment. Okay, it looks as though everyone is in shock and they're impressed with all the knowledge. They're drowning in knowledge now. But this roadmap will be circulated. And of course, as we said, we haven't said the last word on any of these things. There's much more work to be done. And the purpose of this is to get started on that work very soon based on small contracts and building up to bigger, high-impact initiatives a little bit further down the line. So it's over to Pierre now to wrap up. And thanks to everybody from me.
On.
We have too many
Yes,
microphones.
it's on. Yes. No, just a couple of words. It's interesting. The debate goes resource consumption. The resources are finite. You know, it's like a limit to growth in 1970s by the Club of Rome. So we have one planet, and so how we solve it? It goes there, and it goes around skills. So I definitely want to focus on this issue of skills, not only pushing, even though I am engineer, not only pushing technology. It's too bad to develop the technology and not at the same time push the people that will use it and need. Also, the second comment is generic, but I'm sure you have it all in your mind. Is complexity is not in the parts. We can master technology, we can maybe master skills, but it's to bring them together, which is complex, and we don't know where to start. Basically, this gives me this impression. But we should start in the best examples that we have. You mentioned several times, Pierre, where we have done something in Europe, where you have done so. Maybe the roadshow should be to focus at success stories on both sides. So you identify PLE with your colleagues at Terry, 5 sites. I was flagging very concretely to Amit and other colleagues in 2, 3 states, so that we are not always thinking daily. And maybe three types of technologies or 3 types of application. So aviation, maritime, skills development, and it can be done in different states. And then we put all this knowledge together. And reversely, we can do the roadshow the other way around. We bring some of the guys that we will have visited in India to Europe. And again, same story, to visit 3 or 4 countries. Accession countries like Azerbaijan, Italy, France, whatever. But there is only one thing I can promise you this evening is Patrick will not return to Europe until he finishes the report. So we keep him in India, and once he finishes, we send him back. So thank you very much for everybody here in the room, because I like the format. All of you contribute. So it's not only that we have people listen. I mean, everybody's listening, but contributing is important. So it was a pleasure for me to help you on this road. We will continue with the different organizations that are around the table, the different colleagues. And it will take, we have a clear agenda by the end of the year and by next year. So we please trust the European organization, and we appreciate the Indian spirit of going forward. So it's a good combination between planning and having ideas. So thank you very much to everybody, especially you, Pierre, you, Christian, and everybody else. You did a great job. And let's continue. And thank you for Sashim and all the colleagues of Particip in the team here. They are working for me as a contractor, but it works, the logistic works. So thank you very much. We have all this recorded, so we can go back. And thank you for the IT and all and logistic people in this building. Thank you.
I request Dr. Dipankar to give a formal vote of thanks from Terry. And just one of the quote before he starts, I just want to say from my side that I always keep on repeating because I like this so much. Coming together is the beginning, keeping together is the progress, and working together is the success. So keeping together is the next stage for progress.
So I think we had a great workshop last 2 days including today. And thank you, Ms. Patrick and Peric, Margarita, Arina, and everybody in this room. Thank you so much. And I think we have come up with a really good roadmap, all now in bits and bits, and which will be put up by Patrick until then he doesn't go to Europe. So that is already there. And we really, from Terry, would really look forward, contributing in all the sectors that are important to take forward the roadmap definitely. And in all sectors, we have our own, our colleagues working in the circular economy part, the production part, the R&D part, and also the social transformation part to wherever, and we have our presence in all states, not all states, in different regions. In Northeast, we have our presence in, South, in the West, Bangalore, Goa, Mumbai, Goa, Bangalore, Mukteshwar, North, and Guwahati in the Northeast. So anything that we want to do, we are always there to, collaborate and, take forward the roadmap that will come up definitely. And one thing that I wanted to inform you that in the Northeast, there is a refinery called NRL, Numaligarh Refinery, and there we also already have one, bioethanol production plant, and that is being produced from bamboo. So things are happening, but we require, as I have already told, the policy support, because that is how, transformation in the state level is very important, and our support from the government makes everybody very much aware in India. Everything moves with the government in India. So we are all very dependent, and anything that the government focus, they focus, and the community supports it, and can be taken forward. So that is the point that I was talking about policy. But green skilling is something that really needs at every level, which we have already put up in the social transformation slide. And that is a level that we need to discuss and take it further. There are, issues, challenges, and definitely ultimate aim is to, go for, production of biofuel. That is a requirement for India because we are dependent on fossil fuel, 90%. If you can cut that, it's our, saving in our, overall economics. So that is, we would like to go forward. Thank you once again to all of you. Thank you to my colleagues. Thank you to IT, everybody at here, our, participants. And we look forward for the next event whenever we do. Thank you so much.